Mr. Chairman, thank you for taking the time. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
You're here on the tail end of your time leading the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And you know there are a lot of conversations and questions still about what went on and what's going on next. And y'all are watching the other party start to take power and, you know, deal with its transition.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something I've been asked by a lot of people recently and who are curious to know the answers from people like you. Who right now is the leader of the Democratic Party?
Well, I think there are a lot of leaders in the Democratic Party. I don't know if there's one sole leader. We don't have a president at this point, a Democratic president. And so you have leaders in the House, you have leaders in the Senate, you have leaders in some of the other organizations. And that's the one thing that I think people have to understand. That the Democratic Party is an ecosystem. It's an ecosystem that is made up of a lot of Democratic organizations that are led by a lot of Democratic leaders. And they all have to work together in coordination and conjunction as we move forward to the 2026 midterm elections and then eventually get someone who's that one sole leader in terms of our nominee and then the eventual next president.
It is a vast ecosystem that at times finds itself in disagreement. If you're asked by regular everyday Democrats or one of those leaders, they call and say, how should we be responding to Donald Trump right now? What would you say?
Well, one of the things I think they have to push back hard and forcefully in terms of the craziness that is coming out of the White House. You know, I think the strategy for Republicans and Donald Trump and his ilk over there is to flood the zone. It's just to have so much chaos that it makes it hard and difficult to really focus on any one thing because all of it's like playing whack-a-mole. You know, it's one demon popping up after the next and you're trying to knock them all down. You got to pick your battles. You have to pick the fights that really are very, very meaningful for the American people. Because the Democratic Party is so diverse, you know, the Democratic Party looks like America in all of the shades and experiences and backgrounds. Republicans are a little different from us. They're not as diverse as we are. And so when Trump does something and it targeted a specific group that is a part of the coalition that makes up the Democratic Party, we all feel like we need to jump on it at that particular time and address it. Well, he's going after all of these various small groups and communities all at the same time. So it really is hard to then unify everybody to just focus on one thing. But we got to pick up what are some of the big issues that cut across communities and focus on that. And the one big one that we saw just recently was this OMB pause, the impact that that has had, even though they have now rescinded it, I'm told. But the impact that it had is catastrophic. I mean, I take, for instance, the Meals on Wheels and many of those folks there. My grandfather, you know, I was raised by my grandparents. My grandfather had a fourth-grade education. He paved many of the roads in South Carolina. In the last few years of his life, Meals on Wheels was a part of, not only did he get his lunch from Meals on Wheels, but it was also a part of the community that he had because he developed a strong relationship with the people who stopped by and he would talk with them for a few minutes. And it was something that he looked forward to all the time. And he would tell me about those conversations afterwards. But that is a part of the tradition that my family now does in terms of community service. I have two boys, 10 and 5.
Right.
And Thanksgiving and Christmas, you know, I'm driving. My oldest son is the navigator. My wife and my youngest son are the ones that knock on the door and take the meals. That is a part of how we do community service. And they look for us to come there and to build those relationships. To have Trump and his folks who just see numbers on a paper, right? And not understand the ramifications and the impacts on the lives of the people. That's the difference between a Democratic Party and the Trump Republican
Here's
Party.
the thing, though. He's working at a faster speed, and as you said, flooding the zone in ways the Democrats never have when they've had full control of town. Meals on Wheels concerns, issues with what the troops can and cannot do, say, learn, or serve with, other issues regarding foreign aid, and you know, today it's school choice and expanding federal funding, potentially going to religious schools. You pick any one of those, and schedule something for tomorrow, there's going to be 3 other things the next day that make that old news. I mean, this is a pace that Washington's not accustomed to, and that after 9 years, Democrats can't seem to get a handle on. So, you know, is it really just focus on a few big things, let it all play out, and then eventually it starts to lay itself out and you know where to go?
Well, I think you do focus on a few big things and let those be the arms of the umbrella, right? And then fit everything else into the picture. That this is a guy who's very dangerous to the American way of life, how things have moved forward in this country, things that people rely on in terms of their livelihood, things that they rely on in terms of the quality of life that they have. When you think about this, this is a guy who just basically told the NIH, stop doing cancer research. Doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican and independent. It doesn't matter if you're a man from Mars. That will have real ramifications in terms of your life, my life, the folks that we care about. And so what we have to do is take those moments on those things that cut across communities, that cut across party lines, and make sure that we put a focus and a highlight on that and say then, and this is just one example of many examples of how this guy is dangerous and how the Republican Party is rubber stamping him in terms of him going after the fundamentals that make this country great.
You once ran for a statewide office in a red state. If your party's going to make any gains in the Senate and in state houses and in the House in 2 years, you've got to go to the South, you got to go to red states.
Yes.
Where the Democratic brand is not trusted, is considered toxic, is considered too old and out of touch. How do you fix that?
Well, I saw that firsthand in my run for the United States Senate. You know, Santa Claus could have run as a D with a D behind his name and not win on Christmas Day in some parts of South Carolina because the Democratic brand in that community is so toxic.
So how does that change?
And so the way that you change that is you got to get into the communities. You got to go back to the way that politics used to be. You know, I often told a story when I was running for the Senate that my mom was 16 when she had me, and she dropped out of high school, stayed with my grandparents. And so at 18, she wanted to get her own job, and she wanted to have her own place, but she couldn't find a job in Orangeburg. And so somebody told her, said, Patricia, reach out to your senators. At that time, my senators were Strom Thurmond and Fritz Hollins. She reached out to both, and both offices got back in touch because they had strong constituent service offices. And ironically, it was Strom Thurmond's office that got my mom the interview that eventually got her a job. And I asked her, I said, Mom, are you sure that was Strom Thurmond? And she's like, yeah. But she never forgot that because when she needed help, that office reached out and helped her. Politics used to be about that you could reach out to your mayor, your city councilman, or your county council person, and if you needed help, they would help you. I believe one of the things that the Democratic Party has to do is go back to strong constituent service. I started a program when I was the state party chair called Democrats Care, in which we went into the communities and we had home ownership workshops and job building skills and resume building workshops. And we helped people, worked and partnered with the Boys and Girls Club. And we used the Democratic brand for school supplies drive. We got to go back in the communities because if you've helped me, regardless of what I see in the newspaper or what anybody else says in a TV ad, nothing will change my perception of you other than the fact that I know that I've helped you. We've got to do that.
Who's a specific Democrat who's doing that well right now?
Well, I don't know if any Democrat is doing that well, but I believe that is the recipe for what Democrats have to do. Just recently, and I give kudos to this, I'm going to backtrack on that. John Ossoff. My mom is in Georgia. She's a Georgia resident, and she's having problems with her Social Security at this point. And so I told her, I said, Mama, have you reached out to your members of Congress? And no, not yet. I said, I'll send a note to Senator Ossoff.
Well, you're the chairman of the DNC.
No,
of course you're going to get an answer.
Yeah, but immediately she said, and they were so nice, and they all called, and they followed up, and this and that. But listen, I've done that before with some members of Congress and have not seen, not for my family, but for constituents that I've met and have not seen that type of response. So I give John Senator Ossoff, I give you all the kudos. You have a big fan and a new voter in terms of my mom.
Which matters in 26
Which
when
matters
he's running
in
again.
26.
All right, you've got a race to succeed you on Saturday. Who should replace you as DNC chair?
Well, I will let the members of the DNC determine that. But the one thing that we're going to hand over a strong Democratic Party. I've been in this building now for 8 years. 4 years as associate chair under Tom Perez, and then 4 years as DNC chair. When I think back to the DNC, when we walked in this door in 2017, this place is much stronger than what it was at that point in time. The data and the tech investments that we made under my chairmanship, people talk about Howard Dean and the 50-state strategy. We've had 50-state strategy on steroids because we've invested more money into state parties than any time in the history of the DNC. 176 years, no DNC has ever invested this amount of resources. And now we have set a new floor for what the next DNC has to do. We have a red state fund. You got to continue to invest in red states, help them build the infrastructure. We need to go back to voter registration. For the first time in 20 years, the DNC went back into the voter registration game. And that's part of the reason why we beat back the red wave in terms of the midterm election. And so there's a new floor now for where we need to be as a party. And we know that some of it works because we saw the results in the midterms, but we also saw in 2024 what happened on the down ballot. We didn't win the top of the ticket, but hell, we did fairly well on some of the bottom of the ticket. Look at North Carolina.
But you've slipped behind in registration advantages in places like Pennsylvania and Nevada, which are key to winning the White House and to winning Congress and holding on to key state houses. As I said, the brand is not in great shape in a lot of other places where you're going to need to win. You can appreciate why there are many in the party who think it's time for something completely different. Well, if we've been at it for 8, 10 years in a certain way.
Well, I would push back on that. The reason why, we had the best midterm election for incumbent president since the 1930s. Right? We won governor's races in places that people never thought that we would win.
Right, but you just lost the White House.
In Kentucky and Kansas. But this is the thing, Ed. You might just think about the White House, but people who are living in those states are thinking about their governors and their Congress people and their legislators. Right? We've made tremendous gains in those things. I know in the 176-year history, people have written the epitaph of the Democratic Party a lot of times, and people are trying to write it again. But don't sleep on this Democratic Party. What we have to do is to build on the infrastructure that we have built, continue and invest in the red states. Look at North Carolina is a perfect example. Kamala lost in North Carolina. But what happened in 2024 in North Carolina? We won governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, secretary of state, superintendent of public instruction, and a Supreme Court race that the Republicans are currently trying to steal right now, right? That is in a state that Democrats did not do well in the past few years. It is because we invested in infrastructure in that state. And that is how you continue to win.
A lot of people around you, Congressman Clyburn, some of your associates here, have endorsed Ken Martin. Why not just endorse Ken Martin?
Because
wouldn't he be the best continuation of?
I said at the very beginning, Ken is a dear friend of mine, and I think he would be one hell of a chair. But there are a lot of good candidates who I think he would do a really good job as chair as well. I said when I started this process that I was not going to publicly endorse and do that, and I'm going to continue that.
So you're arguing, yes, you lost the White House, yes, you lost control of the Senate, no, you didn't pick up control of the House, but overall, it wasn't that bad for Democrats in 24?
Well, my argument is there's a lot of good in there, and you build on the good. You don't just burn down the whole house. I mean, listen, if the Republicans took the prescription that you're just saying right now, then why would they have won? Because they lost in 20. They lost the White House, they lost the House, lost the Senate. And did they throw their hands up and say, oh God, we got to burn everything down? No, they didn't. The political pendulum in this country is swinging back and forth, and it's swinging back and forth a lot.
Right.
And what you have to do is you got to find the things that work, and we have some things that have been working because we've been winning some of these down ballot races in places that we have not traditionally won. Now we got to take the learnings from that to apply that on a national scale, right?
So if things weren't that bad and if the pendulum's swinging the way it is,
we're going to take the House back, and we will take the House back this next
There are
cycle.
no states where they could play with the gerrymandering again and rob you of 2 or 3 seats like they did in North Carolina?
Well, I mean, and that's the thing. For them, they have to find some way to bend the rules or ignore the rules in order to win. But when push comes to shove, Democrats are going to get more votes. We just need to make sure that we're talking to our people.
Okay, so looking ahead,
Yeah.
should Kamala Harris run again?
Yes, she wants to.
You think she could win?
I believe she can. I mean, if I didn't believe Kamala Harris could win, I wouldn't have worked as hard as I did to help her win this last time around. Donald Trump, and when you look at politics, Donald Trump and Barack Obama are just enigmas in politics. I think they do something different to the electorate every time they run that you can't counter. But then when they are not on the ballots, it's almost like you go back to the political gravity pulls people right back into it. That's part of how we won with how well we did in the midterms.
So you're saying Donald Trump was unbeatable?
No, not he was. Joe Biden figured out how to, right? But Kamala Harris could have used more time and other things. But in the end of the day, Trump won't be on the ballot. He's a lame duck now. And so the question is, who will be on the ballot for the Republicans and who will be on the ballot for the Democrats? And how will the Republicans play their hand over the course of the next 4 years? And looking at how they play the hand so far, that's why I'm very confident that Democrats will take back the House in 26.
Okay, but back to Kamala Harris. You think if she wants to, she should run again. Do you think President Biden should have dropped out sooner?
No, the president decided what he decided when he decided it. And as the chair of the party, listen, I'm going to follow the direction of the people who decide on our nominees. And so,
there were a lot of them whispering, "Get the heck out," even before that debate.
But there were a lot of people. Listen, I was on the ground. I know, Ed, you sometimes talk to the people around here, but I'm usually on the ground talking to a lot of people.
I spent most of last year in Iowa and New Hampshire and all the other battlegrounds, and he wasn't doing that well.
Well, I was in Georgia and South Carolina and some of these other places, in Nevada and Pennsylvania and all. And I can tell you, the black folks that I was talking to on the ground that are the heart and soul of this party were all saying, people need to stand up and support our president because he stood up and supported us. And I think the president heard the same thing. When he went to Nevada and he spoke at the NAACP a week or two right before he decided to get out. I mean, those folks were on their feet saying, you go, Joe, you stay in the race.
Well, that's been his base of support his entire political career. Of course they were going to be with him.
Well, listen, you don't get out of race when now, if your base isn't supporting you, then that's going to send you a signal, right? But I mean, that's where we all run from. It's our base.
So you have no opinions looking back now on whether or not he should have gotten out sooner?
No. In the end of the day, for me, I'm the chair of a party. And this party chooses its nominees through a primary process.
And there are some who say you should have given them a primary process when he dropped out.
Well, no. Do my rules say after? So you're saying, Ed, after the primaries were done, then we should restart another primary process? How do you do that? Who's going to pay for those primaries, Ed? Is the DNC supposed to pay for those primaries? Because primaries cost money, right? So how do you establish? Our rules don't say anything that after a primary, you establish a new primary in order to select the nominee.
Do you know the lay of the party pretty well, and you know all the players?
I try to.
Yeah, it's your job to know. There were 3 or 4 people who would have done it if there either been more time or if there'd been some kind of pop-up primary system established.
Well, what we established is we followed the rules, which basically said if you don't have a nominee, right, then it's the delegates of the DNC, of the convention, who will determine. And so that day, Ed, that Joe Biden dropped out, I called a few of the folks who I thought could possibly be a part of the process. People who had expressed some interest down the road for running.
Handful of governors?
And to a handful of governors. And to a person, every single one of them said, I'm not going to run, I'm supporting Kamala Harris. And it was almost like I was chasing the Kamala Harris calls because they all said, I just talked to the VP and I have pledged my support to her. So people made a decision not to run. Had they run, the rules we set up a process where they could have gone out and secured the signatures from a certain number delegates, and they would have been on the ballot, and we would have gotten it all done before that Ohio deadline, which was the first part of August. So there was a process. People made a decision not to participate in that process, and Kamala Harris, because she did the work, was a winner of that
If
process.
he had gotten out sooner, and she'd had more than 107 days, would that have made it easier for her to win?
Who knows? If I was 2 inches taller and 10 pounds lighter, you know, would I won this U.S.
You can
Senate
appreciate
race.
this will be. You can appreciate this will be a conversation among your fellow Democrats till y'all die.
Well, not with me, because I'm looking to the future. I can't sit back and, you know, if I would have done this and that. I mean, you can do that until you know, you're purple in the face.
I've talked to a lot of Democrats who say until we sort of have a conversation about what went on last year,
why?
It's kind of hard to think ahead.
How does that impact 2028?
Should there be age limits?
The Constitution dictates
No,
what it
but
is.
the party
you know,
could set age limits.
The Constitution dictates. The party can't. I can't put something that is not constitutional in to restrict the
Party could support putting age limits on it.
But yeah, but people are going to vote for what people are going to vote for, regardless of age. And I just think doing these arbitrary things because of one example or whatever, it's just, we have a constitution that dictates what it is in order to run for the presidency. So either you can vote for that person or you don't have to vote for that person. That's what America's all about. But you can't start to, you know, nitpick here and there and trying to do all these cutesy things to solve for something that happened in the past and you don't know how it's going to apply to the future.
I know you've been very concerned about ensuring that the voices and the opinions and the power of Black and Latino voters, especially, are accounted for in this party.
Yes.
And that they rise and that they win races.
It's extremely important.
When you look, however, at the country writ large, do you think the fact that she was a woman, the fact that she's Black, had anything to do with her losing?
I think there were a lot of factors. I think the economy, and I think there is different in different states, right? In Michigan, I think the situation in Israel, the Israel-Palestinian influenced somewhat. I wouldn't say that it was the thing, but I don't know if there's one thing that was the thing. I think it was almost a lot of, maybe you had 10 or 15,000 here, or 10 or 15,000 there because could not vote for a woman, or 10 or 15,000 that couldn't vote for her because she was Black, 10 or 15,000 because they were upset about the economy, 10 or 15,000 because you know, of whatever the particular issue was. And that led to whatever that margin was in each individual state. But the thing that I can say is I'm proud of Kamala Harris. I saw what she was able to do in a little over 100 days. And I can tell you, she put on a masterclass for running a campaign that competed, she had the best convention we've ever had, and I'm happy to be a part of that. She drug Donald Trump around in that debate stage like a week-old bag of garbage. And I'm proud of her on that. And she put her whole heart into it. And I saw it at the first-hand experience, and I saw how much she put in of herself into it. And I'm thankful to her for doing that.
On the future of how Black men and Latino men vote, was what happened in November an anomaly, or is it a sign of things to come, that the erosion of support could continue if the party doesn't seek them out?
I think what it is important is it's a rude awakening to the party, and I say party more so than DNC, the entire party ecosystem, that this is not just about encouraging people to, it's just not about encouraging people to go out and vote. This is about persuading people to vote and to vote with you, right? And sometimes in the party, and I've seen this, we tend to take various constituent groups for granted because we get comfortable when 85 or 90% of Black folks decide to vote for the Democratic Party. And we're like, well, they're going to turn out. We just need to turn them out, but they're going to come out. Or when we see large groups of Latino voters turning out for Democrats, we get comfortable in that and don't feel as though we don't have to do the work to persuade people to do that. I spent the bulk of my 4 years, and many folks that you will probably know will tell you, talking to Black men and Latino men, having small conversations, going to barbershops, doing roundtables around the country. And I saw the warning signs to it. And we had some focus groups, and I saw the warning signs and some of the perceptions of the party as being soft or weak. And
on what?
Just in general, right? Not fighting for their values or the things that they, and there was an appeal to the Donald Trump bravado. Not that they so much agree with Donald Trump on the issues, but it was more of the style by which he did his things. And that was more appealing to them in terms of their perception of themselves and what they wanted to be affiliated with.
Stood by what he believed.
He stood by what he believed.
Even if you don't agree with it.
And sometimes I think what people see, because the Democratic Party is so diverse, diversity is our strength, but diversity comes with complexities, right? Because we're so diverse, we often have these internal debates, and it seems as though the Democratic Party may not all be aligned on one particular issue or what have you, and that can come across as weakness, as opposed to what it is the deliberation to get to that point. And so we got some work to do in that space.
You think your party, elements of your party, too focused on being perfect and not focused on winning?
There are moments in which I do feel that there are folks who are looking. What's the saying about the good and the perfect? I always mess it up, but I feel that there's some folks who
don't let perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yeah, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. I think there's some folks who do fall in that trap sometimes. If you do not fit into, you check these certain bucket items, then you're cast out or you're put on the bench or the back burner. This is we are a diverse party. This is a diverse country. We come to this from different perspectives, and we're not always going to agree on everything. I love my wife more than life itself, and I can tell you we don't agree on every single thing. I'm sure you and your wife don't agree on every single thing, right? And so that doesn't mean then you discard and say, oh, I'm taking my ball and I'm going home, or I can't talk to you anymore. No, you take the time to work it out because there is some commonality there, and you build from the commonality up. And I hope more of our folks get to understand that. You got to be more elastic than rigid. And sometimes we got folks that are very rigid. If you don't have the right job, if you didn't come from the right community, if you don't say the right word, and then therefore you are X'd out or you're castigated. I do believe we need to pause on that. Let's be a big tent and let's be an open tent and embrace more diversity in terms of thought.
Be open to mistakes.
Yes.
Be open to
and
imperfection.
people aren't going to be not perfect.
Focus on winning.
Let's do that.
Yeah. You know that party registration in several big states now essentially favors non-aligned independents over Republicans or Democrats. And there's been a lot of talk about, are things now realigning? Are certain groups heading in a different direction that have been traditionally Republican or traditionally Democratic? You ever think we're going to get to a point where these two big parties either don't exist anymore or have to dramatically reshape themselves?
Well, when
the marketplace is shifting as much as it is?
Political realignment of parties has always happened in this country. I mean, it's shifted. The Democratic Party today is very different than the Democratic Party of 176 years ago, right? And so, you can see the realignment taking place right now in the Republican Party. And there's almost battles for the soul and the direction of where each parties are going. I do believe that we are in these shifts right now in terms of political realignment. Republicans are probably further down the road than the Democratic Party is. But there is some internal, pushing and pulling to see what the parties want to be. Now, the question is, will there ever be a vibrant third party in this country? Structurally, I say no, because structurally we have built it so that there can't be a vibrant third party in this country.
You don't even think there would be?
No.
President Biden did something quite bold on his way out the door, literally, pardoning his siblings a few weeks after pardoning his son. Should he have done that?
I mean, listen, I think the president saw the chaos and the disaster on the horizon with Donald Trump and made a decision to, pardon folks who He cared about and loved, but also pardoned people who didn't deserve to be persecuted by somebody like Donald Trump. And so, the question that I think many of us have, sometimes there's a question about what would you have done in that particular situation?
Well, that was my next question.
Yeah.
What would you have done?
I mean, listen, bottom line, I tell people all the time, my first priority is my family, the people I love, because these jobs are just that, they're jobs. We couldn't do them without them. And so if I felt as though that there's somebody that was unfairly trying to harm them and target them and go after them, then I'm doing everything in my damn power to protect them. I mean, I think that's human nature. And to say somebody would do something otherwise is probably not being very honest with themselves.
Doesn't it neutralize, though, the whole rule of law argument you've been trying to make against Trump?
Because there's a difference between pardoning somebody that you believe is being targeted unfairly and somebody who beat the hell out of a police officer and then has gone on, and other folks gone on to commit crimes, and who are not even, there's no feeling as though that they did wrong, feeling as though that they did right. And now they feel emboldened that they can continue to do those same types of harms moving forward. And so I think those, that apple and orange is not the same. But at the same time, you talked about what President Biden, one of the things that I am proud of President Biden, and I say this as a perspective as a black man, that I don't think he has gotten his due. This was a president, this old white guy from Delaware, Irish white guy from Delaware, who was the able lieutenant for the first black president of the United States. Always had his back, never a doubt that he had his back. And this was the same guy who then decided to pick a black woman to be his vice president, and to pick the first black woman to sit on the Supreme Court, and the first president to pick a black person to be DNC chair, right? Who changed the presidential primary calendar from just having 2 states that were not reflective of the diversity of this nation to then putting a few states with that diversity, not only at the back of the pack, but moving them to the front, and including my home state of South Carolina, where 40% of enslaved people came to this country, right? Who decided to put more black women on the appellate court than all presidents combined. So I say this, and I don't want to, people say, well, there he goes again talking about race, but folks have to understand this. And sometimes it's hard to step out of who you are, but I ask folks to step into my shoes. You grow up in a state like South Carolina, a state that has flown the Confederate flag over the Capitol Dome for almost all of my lifetime, where statues of some of the most hateful people in our history, Ben Pitchfork Tillman, who was a senator from South Carolina, governor of South Carolina, changed the Constitution of South Carolina because he never wanted a black person to be governor. Went to the Florida Senate and talked about the joys of lynching of black folks, right? That is the history. I grew up in a town, the Orangeburg Massacre, where 3 young college kids were shot in cold blood by the state police, right? Learned politics at the lee of Jim Clyburn, who went through the civil rights era. So that's the lens in which I look at the world, and I'm raising my 2 black boys. And those same statues of hateful people are still there. And you have somebody like Joe Biden, who comes in and says, I've seen the history of what has happened. I've seen the history of what's going on in your community. I've seen how your community has been left out, has not had a seat at the table. And now I believe, using the power that I have, not just my words, but the power that I have, to try to remedy that. That is why when people ask me, why are you so loyal to Joe Biden? Why are you so for Joe Biden? It's because Joe Biden was a good man, is a good man, is a decent man, but is a man who has understood the history of this country and the pain that some of the people in this country have gone through, and has tried with his power to remedy that. And that's why I will always stand in his corner. He's a good man, he's a decent man, and he's done his very, very best for this nation and particularly for this party.
Finally, you ever going to run for something again?
It is not in the cards at the moment. What I'm going to do is play some video games with my boys. But, you know, I just don't see it right now. You know, part of my life, Ed, when I first met Jim Clyburn as a junior in high school, and he had just got elected, the first black man elected from South Carolina since Reconstruction. I always knew I wanted to be his heir apparent, run the 6th Congressional District. And all throughout my time, I wanted to, you know, learn more from Jim Clyburn and be a part. I still get goosebumps when I see that dome lit up over there. But to see what happened on January 6th, and to see how folks have whitewashed that, particularly on the Republican side, to see the vitriol and the hatred in the body politic right now, is not something that I want to be a part of. So if it said to open up today and Clyburn said, I don't want to do that. I want to spend time with my boys. I want to spend time doing other things that make me happy. That's not to say that I don't believe that you can do good things over there still.
That's a pretty remarkable admission, though, that January 6th sapped the ambition in life out of you to do that.
It took a lot out of me. I had friends that day, man, and I get emotional when I think about it. My friends who were in, Mr. Clyburn was the whip at the time. And I was texting with them all throughout that day, because as I watched on television, who were fashioning weapons out of pens and pencils and fireplace pokers, because they did not know whether or not they would live to see another day. And then to see some of these Republicans now saying, no, that was nothing, when they were running for their goddamn lives themselves. It betrays everything what I think that places should be. This should not be about loyalty to one person. It should not be loyalty. This is about doing, when you put your hand on that Bible and you lift the other hand and you swear to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, it is not about protecting and defending the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or some nominee or some candidate. It's about doing your job that you were sent to Washington to do. And it's sad to see that so many people over there, so many have forgotten that. And I don't want to be a part of that. I really don't. I want to send some good people there, but I don't want to be a part of something like that. I've always would rather spend time with my family. But why would I sacrifice so much and losing that time with the precious time with my family to hang around with folks like Nancy Mace, who were running around in bathrooms, and Lauren Boebert that's doing something, and name one other crazy that they have over there. I don't want to spend my time doing that.
If they've sapped you of your interest in that, though, didn't they win?
No, because what I'm going to do is do some other stuff to make sure that less of them are sent over there. So, you know, there are ways, you know, Jimmy Carter's presidency, and reflecting on President Carter lately, I've been thinking a whole lot about him. And what I want to do, and President Carter would probably tell you that he was a better post-president than he was president. I want to be a better post-chair than I was chair. And what I want to do is to spend the time to do the things that I wasn't able to do as chair of the party, to rebuild the South for the Democratic Party. I think about Lee Atwater and what he did for the Democratic, how he killed the Democratic Party in the South. He was a South Carolinian, he was the RNC chair. Well, I'm a South Carolinian and the DNC chair, and I want to reverse the harm that he did to the Democratic Party in the South and rebuild that. And so I'm going to spend my time and energy doing that to make sure that the future is brighter for my kids and all the kids, particularly in that part of the country.
You got your work cut out for you.
I know, man.
Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.